All right, so I think we're all here then. So we've already called to order because we were in executive session and we've now adjourned into our business meeting. Do we have any public comment? Is anyone here to make public comment? If so, I don't think we have the chat open, so maybe you could just,
Chat is open.
is it open? I'm just not finding it on my, oh, there we are. If so, please put your name in the chat, name and address in the chat. I don't see any so far. While we're waiting for anyone to do that, is there anyone calling in from a phone who would like to make public comment? If so, just unmute yourself briefly and let us know your name and town. Okay, seeing no public comment, we will close the public comment session and move on to student report. Diego, welcome.
Hi, how's it going, everyone?
Nice to have you.
Yeah, I'm totally stoked to be back. It's definitely a different feel from last year, especially with a lot less public comment, which
Yeah,
is definitely different.
that is to change.
But no, I'm totally stoked to be back. I'm excited for this year. So I thought I would kind of start off this year's student report with positive things that have improved and changed from last year that I think I'm happy about, and I'm sure a lot of the other students are happy about as well. Um, I would say the first big change that I've noticed is just overall, especially in the math department, there are more teachers. And in general, when a teacher's absent, there's always something for us to do. And it seems like overall there are just less teacher absences in general. I don't really know why that is, but it's better. And if there's a teacher that's out for an extended period of time, like I know recently happened with a math teacher, the school had like a great plan for another teacher to replace the classes. So everyone continues to learn even if there's some sort of hiccup, which I think is good. Like that's important. And I know a lot of the students are happy about that. Another thing that definitely has improved, like I don't know if there were any major changes this year, but it seems like the food at lunch has gotten better. And I know like more students are ordering it, which is good. My friends are happier with the food. Um, so that's all good. Um, Outside of that, I mean, I don't really have much to add. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me or anything at all.
Thank you. Let's see, does anyone have any questions for Diego? First of all, thanks for being here. It's great to have you back and to have you as a familiar face also, so this is great. Anyone have any questions for Diego on the committee?
I have one. Diego, are you guys getting back to any school traditions or gatherings, that kind of stuff that we maybe had to leave behind in COVID? Do you feel like things are getting back to normal a little bit?
Um, I think I think in that sense, not like a little bit last year because I know we had I think it was either Veterans Day or Memorial Day, I forget that we had an assembly for. And I know we're getting back to the Spirit Week, which I think is good. But honestly, I've my entire high school experience has been COVID, so I don't really know what it was like before COVID. Um, so
That is an important reminder for us,
Yeah.
yeah,
us
so but
grown-ups who feel like it's been like that, and for you guys, it has dragged on for years of your school.
yeah, it's definitely different, but I feel like yes, we are slowly getting back to, like more normal school traditions of like having like a spirit week and then a pep rally at the end of it. Um, which I think is actually coming up next week. So everyone's pretty pumped for that and I'm happy that we're able to do that. It feels more normal, which I like. I think that's good. And I think everyone likes that it's more normal.
Awesome. Thanks, Diego.
I think Pam has a question.
Yeah, hey Diego, great to have you back. Anything you're hoping for in terms of, is there anything that the student body's talking about that they really hope we do, or changes they hope we see for this year, something that we could be working on?
Um, I would say actually in general, at least something that I'm hoping for is more like whole school gatherings and more assemblies, especially on things like Memorial Day, Veterans Day, 9/11, things like that. I think that's important to have an assembly for. Um, I know a lot of the students feel the same way as well. I think like whole school gatherings in general are good, whether it's for things like that, fun things, anything else, but just doing stuff together as a school, I think is something that everyone enjoys and thinks is fun. Which actually, the football games, I didn't even mention that. The football games are great. That's super fun. The student section's really fun, and that feels like we're finally coming back to normal. Like that feels really good, and that's fun.
Awesome.
The student section is indeed active
Yeah,
at the
it's
football
fun.
games. It's real active.
Yeah, it's a good time. I think, and that's something everyone loves. Everyone loves the student section. It's wicked fun.
Of course.
Shout out to the band, right? The band is a big part of the pep.
Yeah, 100%. That's always fun too. Listening to the band, like everything about it, it's awesome. I like it.
It's great. Well, thank you, Diego. We appreciate your student report. And as we go further and get to know one another, and our committee gets to see what kind of things would be helpful to report back from you, maybe we can work together to come up with some specific things that we might be interested in hearing more about, in future, and that sort of thing, to give a little bit of direction as well. And conversely, please let us know if there are things that you want to hear about in particular, because as a representative here, you certainly have voice there. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Can I ask
I
you a
hear
question
voices
first?
that. Yep. Whose hand am I
This
not
is
seeing?
Jake.
Oh, hey, Jake. There it is.
Diego, before you go, on Teresa's last point, we're looking tonight at this youth risk behavior report. Is that the kind of thing that you as a student council would look at, or do you know if you have plans to look at that in the future?
Um, I can't say that we didn't look at it last year, but I definitely think it's something that's important. And like I think like a little bit of like feedback for it, because I obviously had to, like, I answered the questions last year with a guidance counselor, and I know a lot of my friends did. And I will say that at least from the people that I talked to, and even my own answers in the survey, I would say that the results that you're going to be getting are definitely pretty accurate, because like I didn't I didn't really lie on the questions or the survey at all. Like I was very honest. And I know at least everyone that I talked to is pretty honest too. So that's also something good, and I think you're going to get good information from that. It's definitely going to be pretty accurate, I think.
Awesome. Appreciate your perspective on that. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Anyone else that I missed? I just changed my view so I can see us all a little bit better. Any other committee members have questions? No? All right. Well, thank you, Diego. And we look forward to having you with us each time. And you're welcome to stay or not.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Take care. All right, Chairman's report. So just a few things to report tonight since we last met, ways that I have been representing the community. I have answered a couple community emails from citizens in Essex, just wondering questions about the process of how the boards work together. Had 2 meetings with community members to have conversations about that. Also have scheduled with Pam at the invitation of Tim Collins, to be at a breakfast meeting for the Rotary, for Manchester Essex Rotary in January. So we'll be at a breakfast together, I guess presenting and answering questions for that. So that'll be great. And also signed the end of year report that Avi has to send out, that the superintendent and the school committee chair have to certify. So that end of year financial report. So those are ways I have represented us in the off time. Other than that, I don't have a lot to report. So with that, we'll move into does anyone have any questions for me? I didn't even put that up there. All right, moving into the consent agenda then. Did everyone have a chance before we get started to review the minutes so that we can keep this all together? Yes, excellent. Okay. So then the consent agenda tonight includes the minutes from, I didn't write down those dates. Is it just from the last meeting, 10/4? Okay.
Yeah.
So from October 4th, and then warrants for vouchers number V1015 and V1016. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Can I say something before we approve?
Can we do it after, we need to follow the process for the motion. We make a motion, we have a second, and then we have discussion before we take a vote. So is there a motion on the table?
So moved, Foster.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Kate.
Discussion? Anna, did you have something to share?
About the voucher, so in the subcommittee, we talk about this, and I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more in the subcommittee reports. I have asked Avi going forward to also include the narratives, just give us an update about how we are tracking compared to each budget line. And that way we have an idea of what we are approving.
So I think that would be more appropriate in our subcommittee report right now. And also, we want to just be clear about what we are and aren't asking by the will of the committee here. So that was a conversation that we had in our subcommittee report. Let's hold that for there.
Okay, then can we actually separate the approval for the both then, because my vote will be different for one or the other.
Okay, so you're saying that you would like the warrants separated from the minutes?
Yeah, for the approval.
Okay, so would someone, well, then you'll need to make a motion.
Can I make a motion to separate the approval for the warrants and the minutes?
Is there a second?
I'll second that, Foster.
Oops, I was off.
Okay, any discussion?
The discussion, I would just like to explain why. Like I mentioned, that I would like to, and then we talk about this in the subcommittee. So I actually know a little bit more detail than what on the face value, but just based on what is presented, I will not be voting to push forward for the warrants, but that's just me, one vote. But going forward, when Avi include the narratives and where we're tracking compared to budget, then I'll vote accordingly.
Oh, okay, so let's now that we've made a motion and had a second to separate the two, let's take a vote on whether to separate them, and then we can talk about each one individually. All right, vote to separate the warrants from the minutes for the purpose of the votes. All in favor?
Aye.
We have to go by roll call. Sorry. Kate? Oh, you're on mute.
No.
Jake?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
Where am I? Erica?
Yes.
Chris?
No.
Matt?
No.
And I am a no. The no carries, so we will move forward with the we will have a motion to. Okay, so do we need to remake a motion then to approve the consent agenda together? How does this?
No, I think that motion is already on the table, right?
So
And
we're
there was
not
a motion to amend that was
right. That was the motion to amend. Okay, so now we have had further discussion. And that motion did not pass to amend. So is there any further discussion before we take a vote to pass or not pass the consent agenda as presented?
I would be
Erica?
I'd just be interested in hearing from those of you who didn't want to separate. Why not? What's the harm?
For me, because the question of the consent agenda is, do we vote to approve the things that we've had a chance to ask our questions about already, that we've come to the table prepared to approve? So if we're not prepared to approve these vouchers, then I would have expected our questions to have been asked, discussion to be had. And I think that conversation we can have in the subcommittee report out, but I don't think that we need to tease these out every single time. If anyone else would like to comment on that, you're welcome to.
I will just make the comment that it is something that we are also looking at the policy committee level, because this issue of trying to absorb the amount of information communicated in the vouchers, I think is a legitimate one. And so there have been proposed changes by MASC in terms of how we might do it differently. So I just think it is worth considering.
Yeah.
it's worth consideration.
And I think that's what we've done. Go ahead. Go ahead, Kate.
Erica, I would just add that it's not, my vote wasn't with regards to whether it's worth consideration or not. I just think that in the interest of efficiency, we should be on the same page with what the warrant entails. I don't think that moving forward, we have a ton of time to discuss it at every meeting. I'm interested to hear more about it. I myself have no questions about the vouchers, and I feel pretty comfortable with them, having reviewed them consistently over the last couple of years. I'm more than open to adding it to an agenda in the future, but I think in the interest of efficiency moving forward, we need to be sticking with the agenda that we have.
Okay, that's helpful.
Any other comment?
I mean, I can offer a little context if it's helpful, or I can hold until you get into your discussion about the subcommittee meeting.
So let me ask you, is it going to affect the actual accepting of, because we've already voted not to split them. So if it's going to be toward the actual accepting of those, then yes. If not, let's hold it.
Okay, we'll hold.
Okay. All right. Okay, then in that case, regarding the initial motion to accept the consent agenda, all in favor by roll call. Kate.
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Anna.
No.
Chris.
Yes.
Jake. And I'm a yes. That's 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. Okay, thank you. Subcommittee reports. So we're going to jump right in here because facilities does not have a report, though we do have an update coming later tonight that we'll get from Avi regarding some facilities updates. And then finance subcommittee. So Anna, if you would like to report on our meeting and your question here, then that would be great. And then I'll report out on the collaboration meeting.
Sure. So the finance subcommittee yesterday, when we met, we went over the apportionment calculation, which is super helpful. We went over the budget calendar in more detail. So I was able to understand exactly when things are supposed to happen in sequence, for the next 12 months or so. We also, and I asked in the meeting to, have Avi to prepare more detail with some narratives in the vouchers weekly. That way for the school committees, when we're approving the vouchers, not only we know what is in it, which Avi right now already provide very detailed description about the payments, but we need to know compared to budget how we are tracking. And Avi agreed that is something that he can provide going forward.
I just want to make sure Avi gets to characterize that correctly because I might have heard it slightly differently. But Pam, maybe this is a good time for your context.
Exactly. Perfect timing. So the intent, I guess, just to give some perspective, the vouchers are presented to the school committee for public disclosure of how we're spending our dollars and where we're spending our dollars. So it's supposed to be an oversight function where you're in, a crazy example would be making sure we are not giving contracts to our relatives as opposed to going through using an objective source for procuring pens, pencils, books. So it's that oversight level. It is not intended to provide a bi-weekly accounting of where we are versus every line in the school-based budgets and district-based budgets. Those are managerial functions performed on multiple levels. Principals perform that function with oversight to their departments. Avi provides that oversight of the buildings, and then we report out to you the basic spending. We have already discussed that we are going to be preparing more formal budget to actual reports, not quarterly, but 3 times during the school calendar year to give you more real-time information. And we did discuss the fact that the memo is really something we started to do to provide a little commentary, a little direction on how to look at the vouchers and to bring to people's attention things that might be out of the ordinary or a cost in a particular set of vouchers that is either new to us or not typical. Something like if the legal bills all come in a bundle in one particular voucher packet, there would be a note in that voucher memo that basically says attention to the legal expenditures, which are typical or atypical in a year. The basis of it is this. So it's not a required document. It's something that Avi started doing early on to just assist people in where to focus attention. So I think we heard the request that it would be nice if we could call out in that memo when we were either, you know, when we may be deviating from our original budget document, but there is no way we can do an every other week budget to actual reporting in that memo. We can watchdog and call out extraordinary issues, but I can't support Avi spending any more time than he already does in preparing that voucher packet for every other week's meeting.
So this is not what I took away from, and maybe Avi, you can comment. I thought that when we walk away, Avi, you mentioned that you could probably talk in general how we are tracking for some major categories. I mean, before we get a report, let's say when is in November, when we're approving the expenditures, the vouchers, we are approving how we are managing the budget. So, I mean, not knowing how we are tracking is hard for me, at least, to approve anything. And I thought maybe Avi, you can talk a little bit more.
I don't want to put him on the spot to have to up his
agree.
workload right now. I think we did agree in principle to trying to run a commentary on how we may be performing against our intended budget in large categories, but that we were going to reserve the budget for actual for November. So I think it's somewhere in the middle, and maybe I'm misinterpreting what I'm hearing tonight. But yes, if we're presenting you a set of vouchers that have an extraordinarily large legal line, we are going to call to attention in that memo that this is not tracking well, something that we hadn't anticipated for the year. But the vouchers are there for public disclosure of how we've expended dollars, not for necessarily management of the budget by the committee.
And I will say, I think that's the message that I took out of there as well, with the highlight on, again, that memo being used to call anything that seems out of the usual, or out of the ordinary, or things that we wish to highlight so that we can better understand. But I would also like to point out that all of us on the committee receive our packets in advance, and we have opportunities to email questions. And also, as you know, our finance subcommittee meets the day before each of our business meetings so that we have a chance to discuss these in great detail. So for instance, yesterday, we did have a chance to ask our questions about these vouchers in particular. We had that opportunity. So Kate, did you have a question? Oh, you're on mute.
Of course I am. I wanted to clarify what we are voting for when we vote to approve warrants. My understanding, and maybe somebody could correct me if this is incorrect, is that we approve of those line items, that those are expenses that were deemed appropriate, that is actually where the money went, and that's actually what we purchased with it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? Is that what we are voting on when we approve a warrant?
Sorry, Pam, I'm waiting. I'm looking at you on the screen as if you can see me. Do you want to answer that? That's my understanding as well. And I should say that I am working on getting our committee some very specific training about this, because this question keeps coming up. But some very specific training. This is something that is covered in great detail in Charting the Course, the MASC required training for all school committee members. So I've had to go back and brush up on some of my old slides and everything, but this is covered in great detail there as well. So
I see it. I understand it to be a check and balance, that we are spending money as it was intended to be spent in a legitimate way, is not week by week management of where the lines are and what the spending function is. Just as I oversee the school-based budgets, but I don't micromanage the school-based budgets to force a principal to choose X over Y, as long as the decision is being made and the intent of the expense in the funding is being used directionally appropriately. So I think we're getting so deep into the weeds of managing the vouchers that it's moved from a check and balance to a week-by-week management tool. The only other thing I would offer is some of it is a function of bandwidth and ability to get things done. At present, we spend 6 to 7 hours in preparation of vouchers for those packets. And it's a multiple person job, taking from accounting, payroll, and the business manager's and the director's office. We are going to need additional personnel to up our level of reporting if that's a decision of the committee.
Anna, did you have a final thought on this before we close this out?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that I'm not asking to report about every other week in detail or every week the detail about how we're spending by budget line. I'm asking, as we talked about yesterday in the subcommittee, is at the very general how we are tracking for the major budget lines. Because right now, if we are approving how we are aligned with what we approved previously for the annual budget, there is no way for us to know right now how we are tracking as we approve the weekly or biweekly vouchers.
So I see Avi has his hand raised, and then I'm gonna say beyond that, we either need a motion on the table to move forward with, or we need to wrap up this conversation and we can continue discussing it in subcommittee. Avi, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to, since we have some people on the call from the community and also some new members, just to very briefly state my understanding. I apologize for the background dog barking. But number one, yes, Pam mentioned the memo is new to try to identify issues. The memo does include areas of budgetary concern in the narrative, and I'll continue to do that. But I think in our discussion yesterday, I do want to make sure that given Anna's request, and it's, being on the finance subcommittee, I'm going to just pay extra attention to make sure we're not missing any big things. Really, the way we do manage the budget as we go through the year is in two ways. First of all, school committee has authority over any budget transfers that are required. Typically, we will do that during the year prior to the tentative budget, as well as at the end of the year. In addition, we also provide budgetary updates. You may remember we provided a big one in the late summer where we talked about the major line items that we see as potentially coming in well or coming in worse. And so that type of high-level budgetary reporting is something we have done and will continue to do for the school committee, so you can understand where we're at. And then we will use the periodic 3 times a year budget to actual to get deep into the weeds. So I do think that with this memo, there is a lot of information about how we're tracking for budget. I will make sure to put some more, given Anna's request, so she can understand anything that I know. I certainly want you guys to know. So I think we'll be able to make some progress as long as we understand what it is and what it isn't.
Thank you, Avi. So again, just recognizing that we make requests as a group together, but we do discuss these things in subcommittee. And so I think that unless I hear anything further, we are ready to move forward from that. Okay. The second half of the Finance Committee subcommittee report is that we did have a collaboration meeting. I believe it was it last Friday or yeah, it was last Friday. And the updates we received, so we're kind of getting into it, committee members, we're getting into the meat of what we need to do. At our first meeting, it was a lot of updates. What are people facing? And this time, in terms of updates, we have both of our member communities preparing for fall town meetings right now. So they have a lot on their plates working toward pulling those off, but also there's not a lot of new info from the previous update, except that, so costs are going up and people are concerned and watchful about that. Of course, things like utilities, supplies and other costs, healthcare, insurance, utilities for the district as well. Keeping an eye and just having those open discussions about this. Also the out of district increase in costs for next year. Pam, I don't know if you're going to talk about that in your superintendent's report or not, or if you want to dive a little deeper on that right now, or save it for the budget discussion next time around.
We could save it for the budget discussion last time around, but I think I previewed last meeting that we received word from the state agency that governs tuition increases for out-of-district private placements, that we should be anticipating a 14% cost of living adjustment to those tuitions. That means that the schools can independently raise their tuitions up to that limit without having to go through a secondary hearing process if they need to exceed it. So we're running some back of the envelope numbers on what impact that would be, but that's going to be a direct add of several hundred thousand, potential direct add of several $100,000 to our budget for next year. So I think we'll be getting more into that once we hit November. We are working now to prepare templates for building level leaders and directors to develop their budgets for next year. That will roll up to us in early November. That will translate into our initial district-wide budget, which will come to you the first week of December as the superintendent's recommended budget. We have little workshop sections of meetings beginning in November where we'll start to talk about big picture assumptions for some of our key variables and what impacts it might have, and what we may be looking to do with our budget for next year.
Thank you. So the rest of our collaboration meeting, we at the request of our member towns, Avi was able to pull together some preliminary, not preliminary, some the enrollment numbers, but recognizing that other parts of the apportionment formula, there are other variables that will be changing up to and including the actual budget that we put forth, of course. And so there was considerable discussion about how this might start to look, whether the trend toward it being toward Essex's portion of the pie increasing was going to continue, which wasn't a surprise because with the smoothing, the 3-year smoothing, that is likely going to be the case. So we had some conversation about that, what this might look in terms of a correction package. But again, all of this is very preliminary as the budget is still yet to be developed. And so all of this conversation is preliminary and for the benefit of our member towns to have some open conversation about concerns and what could potentially be coming down the line for that. But again, none of this is a surprise to anybody. And so, you know, Pam and Avi have done a really good job of keeping us aware that this was coming for the past few years. And so our next collaboration meeting, I don't have the date written down, but I will say we also are
18th.
the 18th of November.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. And we also are looking to schedule an all boards meeting. This is something you should be aware of. So the 2 towns boards of selectmen, 2 towns finance committees, and our school committee in its entirety. And I think we were looking at the week after Thanksgiving, but it's not set in stone yet. But so just be aware that that's coming. Anything I missed, Pam or Avi, from collaboration?
Nope.
Okay. So that was our finance subcommittee report. Policy. Erica or Jake, I didn't get a chance to text and ask who would be reporting out, but Erica, since you can't speak, I'm guessing it's Jake.
Indeed, that's the case.
Great.
So we started in looking at the budget section, or the fiscal management section, section D of our policy based on the MASCD updates to those edits. We basically are just about ready to share a version of that. We have a few things to clean up and make sure are copacetic with things like the regional agreement, but we should have those ready to share with you all soon. The second effort that we're undertaking right now is thinking about the reserve policy approach. And we've got some ideas on the table for how to think about that, and potential examples from other districts that we're starting to take a look at. So ultimately, I think we're going to pull together a conversation with some key questions that we need your all input on, and we'll bring that to you at an appropriate time with Pam and Teresa figuring out the calendar there. So that's really the 2 things that we worked on together.
Great, thank you. Are there any committee members? Do you have any questions for Jake about this? Anna?
For the reserve policy specifically, would you be reaching out to the both towns to see what their reserve policies are? And then so we can kind of be in the right ballpark approach.
Good suggestion. We have not taken that up, but we can certainly put that on our conversation for next time.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. It's nice to have a policy subcommittee meeting regularly, and this is great. This is great. Negotiations, Kate or Chris? Don't all jump at once.
Sorry, we have not met since our last school committee meeting, so our next meeting is tomorrow. Negotiations are ongoing.
Thank you very much. All right, that concludes the subcommittee reports. Pam, your superintendent's report.
Yeah, mine's verbal tonight with the bulk of it being delivered in the executive session. That kind of was a big list of things that we have been working on over the past few weeks. I'm going to add for the group now, we had a successful PD day last Friday. I sadly could not participate. I was very disappointed. But Angela Bick, the director of curriculum, worked collaboratively with all of the principals and directors to organize and host the day. It was a great team effort. And just reviewing some of the feedback that we got from teachers, I think it was a thought-provoking day. We did do a significant chunk of time with both the secondary and the elementary, working with Michael Eatman on the concept of cultural competence and what it means for us, and understanding it from the perspective of the diversity that we have in our community. And again, we're kind of focusing on that self-awareness component of developing our competence and becoming just more aware of what the challenge is that we have to face, and how to be more self-reflective about work that we need to do to better prepare ourselves to make the curriculum and instruction accessible for kids. So I think we got some terrific feedback from teachers. I think, you know, like with any new undertaking, we have people who are out in front and completely get it. We have people who are still struggling to make meaning and looking for some more concrete support and what it might look like. And we're still working with some on buy-in, on why it's important and why we're taking this on. But I think it was all in all, a very positive response to the day, and also some hands-on training was in the mix with Project Adventure and the iReady training for staff at the elementary. So a good use of time. My other update is really a lead-in to the youth risk behavior report. So if we want to start to make that transition, I took on the responsibility of just prefacing the report with just you can't take the history teacher out of the superintendent, with just a little bit of background information on how we've gotten here and why we have the team presenting that we do tonight.
Pam, can I pause you for 1 second? Since that's going to
Yep.
be a smooth transition, could I invite, if any committee members have questions for you about the professional development, just
Sure.
in case, so we're not chopping it up. Does anyone have questions for Pam about that? Well, I guess I'm the one that just broke it up and chopped it,
That's
didn't
okay.
I? All right, thank you. Please go ahead.
So we've got Tricia Puglisi, Allison Collins, and Joanne Mano here tonight to present on the youth risk behavior survey results and the results from a survey given last spring. I'll start with, it's a critical team to have at the table, and they all play an important role. Principals are responsible for the health and well-being of the students in their charge. And Allison, as the Director of Student Services, we hear from her most frequently on special ed issues, but she also oversees counseling and support services for the district. And her background is in counseling and support services. So she really brings an expert eye to this work and helps us to distill it and interpret it on a different level. So together we have really an amazing team who look at the information and then really seek out potential solutions on how we can help address the students' needs. The history of YRBS in the district, if we look back through the record, we were doing YRBS in the early 2000s, and then for some reason we stopped. I don't know what decision was made at the time, but beginning around 2011, 2012, 12, we started discussing the need to have a more in-depth understanding of some of the issues that our students were facing, things that didn't necessarily present themselves at face value in the classroom. So we began working with the school committee at the time around the idea of reintroducing YRBS. And this was done in conjunction with our efforts to really shift our thinking from full court press on student achievement and to try to balance it with understanding of the whole child. And whole child is the early phraseology for social emotional learning, really. So it's that concept that to get great success for our students, we have to understand them as the complex beings that they are. It's not just about delivering content to students, it's about understanding what they're bringing into the room and adjusting our practice in a way to make it more accessible to them. So we thought having a broader sense of where our kids are at and what they're struggling with would be helpful in developing that understanding. And that was the reintroduction of YRBS in 2015. So our intent is to learn about our kids in a way that can be helpful and productive. I would say on parallel track to the work of transitioning to a balance between student achievement and whole child needs was also a reorganization of our counseling services, shifting from generalized guidance counseling at all levels to providing a higher level of professional degree and moving toward adjustment counselors. So people who had more of a social work background and approach to the work. So that really is a credit to the team for bringing that forward. And I think you'll hear tonight from the group that as we are identifying needs, we're also identifying that we have a structure in place to help address it, and it was proactively done. So we feel pretty well equipped to take on some of the issues that are presented here tonight. So just a little bit of background on the why and the when it was reintroduced to the district and the team, the reasoning for the team that's before you tonight. And with that, I'm going to kick it off to the group. I will fumble around with the tech and bring up the slide deck.
Can I just confirm while Pam's doing that with Maria, are we recording?
We
Okay,
sure.
thanks. I just wanted to make sure mine, I can't see where it is. Oh, there it is. It was hiding. Thank you.
We good?
Sorry, are we all, I'm talking to myself. Are we all looking at the YRBS slide deck?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we are good. Take it away, Tricia.
Right. Well, you can I like move it or no, you have to move it, right?
You're going to have to tell me next slide.
Next.
Oh, okay.
So actually the YRBS is actually also called the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance System by the CDC. This was a survey developed in the 1990s kind of to help communities, regions, states, and country to understand what types of behaviors were occurring amongst youth and young adults that could lead to future problems or issues, and to provide information to communities to be able to respond to the youth and young adult decisions. One thing we need to know about this is that the survey changes every 2 years. So when we did our survey last year, we were using the 2021 survey, which is available for the years 2021 and 2022. The last time we did a survey was in 2018. That was the 2017-2019 survey. And then 2017-2018 survey, I'm sorry. And then we missed the 2019-2020 year. So there's some gaps in our data here. So we're going to be reporting tonight on our data from the 2021 survey We're going to compare it to our 2018 data, along with the Massachusetts average from the 2019 survey. The 2021 data for the state and the country is not yet available for 2021. We can go from there. As Pam was saying, we began back in 2015. We implemented in 2016, 2018, and 2022. We went on pause. We were about to implement the survey in 2020, the week prior to the COVID shutdown. We do this every other year, basically because the survey changes every other year, and we alternate with the middle school. So we were last spring. The middle school will be this winter, spring, and implementing their survey. The reason why we elected to survey in the spring is because our juniors and seniors are at their oldest. Our juniors are moving into that place where they're finding independence because they have their licenses and things like that. And we see a shift in behavior in grades 11 and 12. So we wanted to be able to capture that information. That was a decision that was made back in 2015. And we use the data not only for our school, but we like to provide it for families in the community. In the past, up until 2019, we worked on a regional committee with Gloucester, Ipswich, Beverly, Rockport, and a group called SAPC, which is Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition. That was a quarterly meeting that we attended along with other principals, boards of health, school resource officers, and others to talk about each school's results to see how it would inform community practices and set up initiatives within the communities, such as the sticker shock that took place in 2019 to kind of alert families. They put stickers on different alcohol items in stores such as Richdale to say, hey, if you're buying this for a minor, did you know that this is the law? So we were very much involved with that. That was a grant-funded program. And unfortunately, I believe the grant funding has gone. But that grant funding also helped us with the YRBS and helping us to have statisticians kind of slice and dice our data. With that gone, now we're doing it back ourselves in school. But in the past, I hate saying pre-COVID because that's getting such to be an old term, but it is very true in this case, and that there was a lot of action going on Cape Ann based on the YRBS results. And I think schools are now just kind of transitioning back to being able to use this data. We can go ahead. So if we look at the students who took this survey, one thing I noted when looking at the data was there was not a category of non-binary in terms of reporting gender. And that's something I would suggest that we add moving forward, as it is part of DESE's categorization of gender as well. And if we look at the class representation, we have a total student body, 76% of the students took part. I'm very concerned about our freshman data in that it looks as though only 64% took part. And I believe that is an error on our school's part, to be very transparent. They took the survey in March. We don't actually work with the data until the summer when we have time to really look at it deeply. And I'm questioning whether there was a section or two of the envelopes that either did not come back or were misplaced. And that's not something that typically happens, but we take ownership of that error. And typically in the years that we've done it, the seniors are there's a lower participation rate at the seniors. We had 10 students opt out, our families opt out their students from taking part in the survey. And that's something families certainly are welcome to opt out of. So we'll take a look at the next slide. When we used the data interpretation, actually Allison helped me to kind of, I need to rephrase this, that due to enrollment, 1% is actually equates to 3 students, not 3 to 4 students. Our last survey, again, was done in 2018. Our comparison and this information includes 2022 to 2018 and the 2019 state data. The 2021 state data is not yet available. So now we jump into the data. So our kids are pretty safe in the cars. One thing we want to look at is when we talk about in a car with a driver under the influence, that doesn't necessarily mean a student. That could mean a student could interpret that to be, I went out to dinner with mom and dad. My dad had a glass of wine at dinner and he drove home. So that we want to kind of put that in context, and that we know that there is some interpretation when students are reading the question. We are glad to see that our students have started to learn about not texting and driving, and there has been a great decline there, and we hope that that decline continues. We can jump there. So this is a really important slide about mental health. When we think about student achievement and mental health, it's directly related. I know that anybody who's taken a psychology class has learned about Maslow and the hierarchy of needs. And when you look at Maslow, you know, the bottom level is your regular air, water, clothing needs to be met. The next level is safety. And the third level is sense of connection. If those needs aren't being met, you're not going to get to that place of self-realization, which is where real learning is happening. So if kids are feeling as though they're anxious, depressed, unsafe, that is going to impact their achievement in school. So this is important data. So when we look at feeling sad for 2 weeks or more in the past 12 months, our data jumped from 2018 to 2022 from 22.6 to 30.5. In some ways, it kind of makes sense with COVID, but in other ways, you know, it's a number that we really need to focus on, that is a concerning number, that kids are feeling sad at that great of a length, showing some levels of depression. When we talk about considered suicide, when we look at those numbers, yes, we're below the Massachusetts total of 17.5, but I would say anything over 1%, anything over 0% to me is not okay. But we're at 13.8%. And then you're going to see some inconsistencies with these last two numbers, and I spent some time thinking about it. And it says, did you make a plan about how to commit suicide? And our kids say 8.8% did, but yet attempted suicide in the last 12 months says 11.3. That may indicate some more impulsive behavior as opposed to actually sitting down and considering a plan. But again, on that number, we're far above the Mass 2019 numbers, and it's something that we really need to digest and to think about as a community.
Sorry.
I think we can jump there. That's a tough slide. When we talk about smoking, kids are smoking far less than they have in the past, and I think that's a great thing. We also are seeing that our use of vape products have gone down. Not only have they gone down, but what we're seeing is that although students, yes, they are vaping, that is happening. We're seeing as though they're using vape products less often per a month than maybe we have in the past. So we see that 39% of those who have ever used a vape product used the product 1 to 10 days in the past 30 days. In the past, we might have seen that be every day in the past 30 days when vaping was at its height, although it is still very prevalent amongst our teens. Smoking cigarettes and smoking cigars are down. And again, we see those on a very limited basis over a 30-day period. When we talk about alcohol use, that's something that's been on our radar for a number of years. in terms of drinking alcohol, but more so the number binge drinking, which binge drinking is described for female students as 4 drinks in a 2-hour period, and for male students, 5 drinks in a 2-hour period. We're still pretty high above the Massachusetts average, and it's something that's been on our radar for some time throughout all of Cape Ann. Actually, when I think back to my SAPC days and the obtaining of alcohol from family member or friend being the prevalent way of obtaining alcohol, that is what actually spurred the sticker shock campaign back in 2019. Marijuana comparison, it is great to see our numbers down in terms of smoking at least one time in a lifetime and below the state average, and also down in terms of smoking in the last 30 days. The current age, the age of when students would become introduced to use of marijuana is 13 to 14, which continues to be a concerning data point. Other drugs are very low in terms of prescription drug use, methamphetamines, and heroin. Offered on school grounds remains consistent. That means a few different things. It could mean in school during the school day, in the bathroom, after school, in the locker room, out at a football game on a Friday night. So that's kind of what that number entails. Not great. Violence-related behavior, we're very fortunate in this aspect in that our students, when it says NA for 2018, it's just that I didn't have that data available to me, but we're far below the state averages in terms of weapons in school, having fights on school grounds. The one place that we're above, and actually in 2018, I was horrified at 8.6%. I'm even more horrified at 11%, forced by a date to take part in a sexual activity they did not want to. That includes kissing, touching, and/or sexual intercourse. The state average is 6%. Our average is our number is at 11%. And that needs to be a focal point for the safety of our students. Body weight, I chose to portray the data for this question in this way, mainly because anecdotally, through our counselors and the data we're seeing there, we're seeing an increase in eating disorders amongst female students at the high school. And so I wanted to show the number of female students at 22.3% that describe themselves as overweight, but the number of female students at 49% that are attempting to lose weight. And that just, to me, I'm just a high school principal, but to me that says that there's some concerns about girls have about their body image, and what we're seeing in terms of eating disorders is anecdotally through our counselors is concerning. So that's why I chose to show that slide that way. Mental health and sleep. This mental health question was a new question, and it's at the very end of the survey. There was no data from 2018 or 2019. So all we have is our data, and it was a question that wasn't even placed in the survey in a section that seemed to me to make sense. But anyways, poor mental health during the past 30 days, meaning that a student was feeling stress, anxiety, or depression. More than half of our students are feeling that way, at least one day per a month, if not more. And that's, again, part of that is being a teenager, but part of that may be something more than that. And then consistently, our students are receiving less than 8 hours of sleep, 70% in 2018, 71% in 2022. After 2018, we did have a number of conversations about sleep in teens with the school committee and with students to talk about things like late school to start and what they think about that, or what could change to help them to access more sleep. And we have not yet unsolved that riddle, but it's something that we need to continue to focus on. And then and bullying, we've seen a decline in bullying at school and electronically, somewhat electronically. I will say over the past year, we haven't had any formal reports of bullying at the high school, but just because we haven't gotten a formal report doesn't mean that a student isn't feeling as though they've been bullied or that they haven't been bullied. And it's something that we always want to pay attention to for the safety and security of our kids. So I provided a lot of background information on SBIRT, which is screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment. This is a requirement by the Mass Legislature that since 2016 that we implement this screening twice between grade 7 and grade 10. We do the screening at grade 7 and at grade 10. And it is to identify students who may have a substance use disorder and to help those students to find appropriate treatment and support. And if we want to go to the next, I'm going to explain kind of how the screening works. So that's the legislature right there. And then there's the CRAFT screening tool. So what happens is, I'll explain the high school version, and which is probably similar to the middle school student. First, families do have the opportunity to opt out of this screening. I think at the high school we had 5 students opt out. Students are called to the guidance office where there are 5 different counselors available. They're called in groups of 6 and they're kind of separated out. The counselor gives a brief introduction to why the student's there, what is SBIRT, and what is the data used for. They help the student to feel at ease. They explain that the information is confidential, and then they ask the student permission to proceed. The student at that point can opt out on their own. They don't have to take part. For the high school in last spring when we did the SBIRT, 100% of the students that were asked if they wanted to continue opted to continue. The counselor then asked them a series of questions that are scripted as have they used alcohol in the last 12 months? Have they used drugs in the last 12 months? Have they used marijuana in the last 12 months? And the student answers yes or no. Based on their answers, they moved on to the CRAFT screening tool, which is has been formulated by Boston Children's Hospital. And it is a tool to kind of dig down a little bit deeper and identify students who may need to be referred to other services. And so all students, when you go to, if you go to the next screen, which is actually the middle school, if you don't mind me just jumping in for a second, that first question where there's 92 students questioned, all students get asked that question. So have you ridden a car driven by somebody high? Again, that could be a parent driving home after a glass of wine at dinner. And then down below, the numbers are much smaller. You'll see those 5s. So those 5s are students that answered yes to one of the prior questions. They had drunk alcohol in the last 12 months, or they had smoked tobacco in the last 12 months, or they have smoked marijuana in the last 12 months, or they have done drugs. So those are those 5 students. And then the counselor digs down deeper by asking these series of questions. And if the student says, no, I don't use alcohol or drugs to relax, well, then that's a negative response and they're screened out. If they were a positive response, then they would ask more questions to them. They would give them positive reinforcement for talking about, their behavior and actually helping them to use maybe strategies. If you had driven in a car with a teenager that had alcohol or was under the influence, what are some strategies you could use to avoid that in the future? Could you have a code word with mom and dad? Could you maybe decide to take a different route home? So they provide education to students, they provide positive reinforcement, they encourage good behavior. But if there's a real concern, then they will ask the student, and again, it's by the consent of the student, if they can call their parent to discuss their concerns, and offer referrals to the parent. If the student refuses, then they continue to offer education to the student about practices. And again, this data is reported to the state and is used on a state level. So that's our expert numbers. You can see, again, of the students screened, there were 27 students that had answered yes to one of those prior questions. And 2 of those students had come back with a positive for either alcohol or drugs to relax. And these are all grade 10 students. That's fine, thank you. Joanne, I kind of took your thing on the 7th grade. I'm sorry.
Not a problem. If anyone wants to ask some clarifying questions at the end, I'm happy to answer. Good news across the board. Just quickly, of those 5, 4 students said very little use. 1 of them said occasional use, and that's what prompted these additional craft questions. I'm happy to answer questions when it's that time.
So our greatest areas of concern, really, they've stayed consistent for a few years. Mental health being our number 1. These are not in any specific order, but mental health definitely is our number 1. And I'm going to talk about how we've addressed that over the past few years. Vape use and marijuana use, although it's gone down, continues to be a concern for our community and our families. The alcohol use, particularly binge drinking. Dating violence has been a concern now for 5 years. Body image is something that's newer in terms of a concern, in terms of anecdotal information of particularly female students with eating disorders or emerging eating disorders. And then the amount of sleep our students are getting continues to be a concern. Over the past few years, based on the data that we've received, we have developed programs. At the high school, yes, we have our guidance staff who provide support for all of our students and are on call at all times. We have 2 adjustment counselors. We added an adjustment counselor last year. These people are to help students with greater needs than a typical guidance staff member would be prepared to offer. They are licensed clinicians. We've developed the Bridge program. The Bridge program is an academic support and counseling support program for students returning after an absence of more than 5 days. So these may be students who may have had to take part in a hospitalized program. Instead of when they come back after 5 to 10 days, there was a time in my career that we would say, go back to class, see your teachers, and get your makeup work and get back on track. That's not really the right response to a student returning with tremendous anxiety. So now we use this transition program to allow students to come back into the program, work with the counselor, work with academic teachers to create a plan to step back into classes, to streamline makeup work, to support them and to assure that we're not going on to multiple hospitalizations. And what we've seen is that we have reduced, although we have students going out on hospitalizations, when they do come back, we are helping them to find success in transitioning back into the school without needing to go back out to a second or third hospitalization. The transition program is a special education program for students with social emotional needs. It's through the special ed program, and it's housed by a special education teacher, a school adjustment counselor that's tied to the program, and several TAs that support students in the program and when they go out into classrooms. We've partnered with the Salem State Graduate Counseling Program, and we currently have, to kind of help out our staffing, a counseling fellow who's working mainly in the middle school, but also supporting high school students. And over the past, about 6 or 7 years ago, we developed our high school schedule, which all of you would be very familiar with in terms of having U-block and a waterfall schedule with only 5 classes meeting per day and 2 dropping, which helps in terms of homework and also opportunities to do schoolwork and meet with teachers during the school day. We have gotten tremendous feedback from our students and from our teachers about that schedule, and then providing just to have downtime during the day. You know, students go to 2 classes, then we have U-block, which is a 45-minute kind of break in their thinking. Then we go to a class and a half to 2 classes with lunch, so another break in thinking, and then the end of the day, 1 class, and then dismissal. So we do have these natural breaks for kids through the school day to help support their mental health. So there's some of these things we've been considering or working on. We do have a plan to be mapping our health curriculum, actually K through 12, in particular 6 through 12. Anecdotally, again, we're finding students are asking for more health education, particularly around relationships and sexual interaction. They feel not as prepared when kids are candid and talk about things. And that will take part of our 5-year curriculum review cycle that's managed by the Director of Curriculum and Instruction. We need to really engage more than already has been an unbelievable help. Our school resource officer in structured school program around healthy decision making. She's been making tremendous relationships with kids and helping them kind of navigate the world, but we need to formalize some of that work. We ask you to continue to support our current programs of Bridge, School Adjustment Counselors, our Guidance Counselor, and our use of fellows. We are very appreciative of the funding that have gone to those programs over the last 5 years, and we hope to maintain the levels that we currently have to support our students. In the past, and into last year actually, we have had parent education programs, K-12, and that's something that we need to look at and continue to target those programs to specific things that we're seeing with students. One thing we talked about this year, and actually I'm going to say it here, I'm not sure if the community is prepared yet. I see Pam looking up like, what are you going to say? But, but one thing we have, we know this, is that the access to pornography by students is having a tremendous impact on their brain development and how they view relationships. And we need parents to understand that, and we need to provide students with education around that concern. And that's not an easy thing for a lot of people to talk about. We again need to maintain our data through counselors and through the YRBS of student behaviors. And I see this 2022 data as baseline data moving forward. We went through this pandemic. This is us after a pandemic. Let's see if we can correct some of these mental health issues moving forward. And the YRBS will be conducted with middle school in this coming second semester or second trimester, sorry. And I think that's all I have. Welcome to respond to questions along with my friends, Allison Collins and Joanne Mano.
Thank you so much. Before we open it up for questions, Allison or Joanne, is there anything you'd like to add? She's done a great job.
Very thorough.
Excellent. And same goes for you, Pam. Is there anything you'd like to add before we open it up for questions?
They did a fantastic job with this. I think they can move on to answering questions.
Great, thank you. Okay, is there anyone from the school committee who has questions? And for the public viewing, just so you know, we receive our packets in advance and are able to submit questions. I know a number of mine were answered within the presentation, which is very helpful. That doesn't stop me from having more though, so let me see if anybody else does first. School committee, if you have a question, just raise your hand. Wow, guess it's me that has the questions. Okay. Well, like I said, you did answer quite a lot of them. I think that I just want to first state that the downward trend on so many of these measures is really encouraging. Really appreciate that. So my first question to you would be, what do you think have been, the top most important things that you have implemented in the past few years that are really driving this home to make those changes?
Yeah, and I want to say, I'm not sure it's just the school. I think it's also family awareness and community awareness when we start talking about things like vaping or alcohol use. A lot of that has to do with support of families and family knowledge about those topics that really help support the schools and kind of minimizing those behaviors in the schoolhouse. We've seen, I think the culture that's being developed in our schools in terms of developing trust with our kids. I mean, we have tremendous kids. They always want to do the right thing. And when they're not, they're responsive and they take ownership. So, I mean, we love our kids. But that's not to say that teenagers are going to have certain behaviors. My biggest concern for our kids is around mental health. I think we've provided, the school committee and the communities have supported the addition of staffing. And I think as we're in this post-pandemic world, we really just need to continue to develop that supportive culture and to provide students with the resources inside and outside of school. I mean, there is a problem with access to qualified therapists outside of school for our students. And we can pick up part of that, but we cannot pick up all of it for students. And there's some counseling that is not appropriate for in school. And the students really do need that access in the communities. And one thing I should say about that, one of the, again, pre-pandemic things, and one of the things that we continue to take part in, actually this Friday, Pam and I will be going, is meeting with our local legislatures and the Cape Ann Chamber and other leaders on Cape Ann, where they listen to the school's feedback about what is needed. And just prior to the pandemic, we had a meeting and every school at the table was calling for more funding for counselors in and out of school and access for children to therapy. So hopefully we'll see that continue when we attend the first post-pandemic meeting with that group on Friday.
If I could just add to that, the work we've been doing within the Ruler program, we're in year 6 now. There was a reprieve during the pandemic, but we have been in it and doing it, and we're normalizing social and emotional health for students, and we're giving them a vocabulary and a platform to talk about how they're feeling, to talk about their emotions, and to talk about regulating themselves and things like that. So I think we're creating a strong culture where kids feel comfortable talking to each other, talking to adults when they're not feeling okay, and perhaps coming to adults sooner than they would have in the past had they not been given this tool that we're continuing to implement with them.
Thank you. On a related note to that, I'm going to answer my 3 because I called myself first, Anna, sorry, and then I'll get to you. Well, I only called myself first because nobody else raised their hand. But anyway, related to what you just said, I was noticing when Trish was talking about that extra question at the end, have you had, how has your mental health been over the past 30 days? This seems a little out of place for the context of the survey in that way. And some of the examples there were stress, anxiety, and depression. Stress is an expected part of the teenage experience. And I'm wondering, regarding anxiety and depression, do you get the sense that our students understand those terms in a clinical sense versus in anxiety meaning nervous or stressed, or depressed meaning sad? That anecdotally, I can tell you some students use those words, not in a clinical way. What are your thoughts on some of that?
Well, I agree with that in terms of the way the survey question is set up. I mean, stress is a typical part of daily life, particularly for an adolescent. So I'm not sure that they, in that question, are considering it in a clinical manner. I think they're considering those words in their adolescent thought process, which would make sense. Even so, I think it's important to be cognizant of that. I know, before starting the survey, our school had a reputation of being a pressure cooker that, really overstressed students. And we've really taken steps to try to balance that pressure cooker and academic achievement. And I feel as though we've maintained the academic achievement if we look at our numbers over time, while providing some opportunities for students to have space.
Thank you. And then my final question, with the preface that health education is the thing I'm passionate about. It is the only question I had for a school committee member prior to serving on school committee or task forces associated with it had to do with health education. And I'm deeply concerned about the dating violence numbers and how that relates to the health education that we have or don't have. And I am really enthusiastic about the moving forward, aligning a K through 12 curriculum. I know our committee is generally parents of younger kids. So I know what the middle school health curriculum looks like. I know what the elementary health curriculum is or isn't. Can you just very briefly tell me, do students have health education each year at the high school level? What do we have?
They have health education 1 quarter freshman year and 1 quarter sophomore year. The other quarter is physical education. So it's a semester of gym and health. Our program is somewhat limited. We need to expand our topics. One of the issues with health curriculum is the standards are from the new standards. I don't believe are out yet. They should be coming out in the next this year. They're from 1999. They're very outdated.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to see things like the impact of pornography on the adolescent mind and relationships. But that is the reality of the world we live in today. Pam, do you know, when are those standards?
Yes.
I should know this, but when's the date for those standards?
We were just talking about this at a meeting a couple of Fridays back. They should be coming out for review and comment in the spring. So at the meeting, the heads up was, if you were going to undertake rewriting your health curriculum, maybe wait till next fall, because it's going to be a substantial change.
And I will say, over the last few years, each year during score time, there are students who have offered to help write curriculum for our health department on things like LGBTQ topics or on sexual relationships from their point of view. That is how passionate they are that these things really need to be implemented into the curriculum.
Right. Thank you very much. Like I said, this is where I'm passionate. about our student experience. So I really appreciate that outlook. Anna, did you have a question?
Yeah, so my kids are not quite at the puberty stage yet, so like this is eye-opening to me, and it's actually thank you so much for putting together the survey. My question is, looking at this program developed to support students, the kids spend a lot of time with the coaches and at home with the parents. So what are some of the programs that we're developing to incorporate, the parents and also the sports activity coaches and whatnot?
So there have been parent programs that we've brung in people like Elizabeth Englander, and I'm going to be at a loss for the last few years. Last year was Elizabeth Englander, but we brought in Liz, no, Lyons, what Liz?
Blue Lions.
Thank you. To talk about anxiety and depression. We tend to try to do 2 programs per year for parents. I will say they're very lightly attended. Generally about 30 parents attend. But for those 30 parents, it's informative. And I guess that's a step in the right direction. In terms of our coaches, I can speak to the high school level. The MIAA, although there's some things I don't agree with them, they do really promote the concepts of coaches building relationships with students, student athletes, and really promoting healthy lifestyles and healthy decision-making along with sportsmanship, which all kind of ties together to that solid student athlete making good decisions. Our coaches do take part in training, and our new athletic director, Cami Molinari, has just done an outstanding job changing the culture of our athletic program and really pushing our coaches into being there as a trusted adult for our students beyond just being a coach.
I'll jump in. Thanks, Trish. District-wide, 2019-2020 year keeps coming up as it was a year that was really packed with a lot of forward motion. When COVID hit, we were in the middle of rebooting the Health Advisory Council, which is the Wellness Committee. We were about ready to launch our strategic planning work. We were getting ready to roll out ruler parent education workshops as part of our parent ed series the following year. So a lot of things just hit a wall and we're not quite back up to speed. We had a pretty robust annual parent ed schedule, which attempted to have something each quarter of the year for parents, either around anxiety or mental health, bullying or anti-bullying. So I think if we take the success of that program and marry it with what we've learned through COVID about how to use virtual tools, we might be able to reach more people. We're just, in all honesty, still trying to get back on track from the past couple of years. And I think living through it, I didn't feel like it derailed us all that much, but when we kind of go back and take stock of where we were and what we were poised to do and what just kind of went on the back burner, there was really a lot going on that year. We were working on Vision of the Graduate and everything just kind of got pushed off to the side. So I think you're going to see that type of programming resurfacing. We're just, hopefully get up to speed a little bit quicker, maybe even for the second semester this year.
All right, Jake has his hand up. Thank you for your question, Ann.
So thank you all for this and Trish for the overview there. I have 2 questions. The first is around, my understanding is that that there are questions on the survey around students feeling like they've been treated badly or unfairly based on race or sexual orientation. Is that data, do we have any data like that?
That actually, those questions are not on there. There's one question where at the end of the sexual activity part that asks the student to identify as either heterosexual, homosexual, gives a list. It does not offer any questions that state that a student was treated poorly based on sexual identity or on race. Allison and I actually were talking about that, and we were saying, if we had a statistician working on the work, that yes, they might be able to, since there are demographics at the start, dig deeper on the bullying numbers in terms of who is reporting being bullied, but that the only question is around being bullied. So that information isn't as readily available, but the one thing that the Youth Risk Behavior Survey does allow is for us to add our own questions. So when we look at the 2023 survey that should be out for the middle school's implementation, we could take a deeper dive in terms of adding some of those questions. But with I guess I'll be honest, I'm not a statistician. And I manipulate the data to the best of my ability, but I wasn't able to dig that deep in the data.
All right. Well, thank you for that clarification, and sorry if I had a misunderstanding there. And I think it would be a good thing to pursue if we could have find some appropriate questions for the future ones. So my second question has to do with the steps to be taken here. And I very much appreciate those extra steps that you're starting to identify or plan to consider. I guess the Wellness Council, restarting that, the curriculum, health curriculum review, definitely big efforts there. Is there a reason that we didn't include that in the improvement plans or strategic plans? In other words, is this additional work that is above and beyond what we currently have in our improvement plan that we're going to need to budget for, plan for? What are the impacts in terms of your scope of work, since we did not include it in those plans?
So it's a K-12 review. And so what the district has for all the disciplines is a 5-year cyclical review of curriculum. And actually health and wellness is up for the first year of the 5-year process next school year, which actually coincides with, as Pam was saying, the release of the standards. So every discipline works through this 5-year review. I think making it more of a K-12 review. So the elementary schools don't really have a robust health curriculum. And the middle school has an unbelievable health curriculum led by Janda Rickyman, who does a tremendous job there. And the high school has a very limited health curriculum. So we really need to look at that full continuum along with the new standards as part of the 5-year curriculum review that is part of typical district work, I guess is how I would respond to that. I don't know if anyone else has more. I can only speak to the high school.
In the meantime, what we have done is we've connected Janda and the high school health teacher during extended days and professional development time so that they can begin mapping vertically what exists now, so that when the new standards roll out, they're in a position to move more quickly because they'll have a starting place.
Thank you.
Can I take a point of clarification on, or I forget which Robert's Rules point it is. Kate can help me out with that. But Pam, could I invite you to share a little bit regarding Jake's question too, about how this plan fits into what we've already done in terms of the work for the strategic plan and all of that, and budgeting?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. I will, looking at this in our timeline, I would say budget requests or needs will start to surface as we're prepping our next round of improvement planning. That being said, it would be impossible to get everything into the strategic plan.
Yeah.
So if we are going to do routine maintenance, so to speak, on all of our curriculum areas and things start to surface on that, we will find ways to work it into our next iterations of plans. The other thing is, if updating our curriculum is one thing, and that's very low cost. If suddenly the only way we can deliver the curriculum is by adding staff, our first look will be to see if we can transition out older programming to make room for newer programming, because it doesn't mean what we have today is what we're going to need 3 years from now as we go through other investigations. And if it becomes direct ad, we either need to make a pitch separate of improvement plans or work it into improvement plans. But like we've tried to say, all of those documents are living and ongoing. So if we surface new things through our work, we have to amend our goals.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from school committee members? Erica, go ahead.
Mine's a really easy one, but I think you started to say at the beginning that this information was going to be disseminated or in some form shared with families. And I'm not sure if I missed it. I am battling a terrible head cold, so apologies if you can't understand me. But can you just repeat for me what the expectation is there and how or if you will share this information?
Definitely, yes. So certainly our first presentation is always to the school committee to bring it into public record. Tomorrow during our faculty meeting, I'll be presenting this exact same presentation to our faculty members so that they're aware of the state of our students. And then in the past, and again, we can change this up and do it any different way that the group feels that we have always posted it on websites, but if we feel as though we should take a deeper dive with a narrative or something, certainly that's something we can pursue if that's what people think would be best. You know, just because the way we've done it in the past is the way we've done it in the past doesn't mean it's the way we have to do it going forward. Whatever's going to support families is best for me.
I didn't have specific feedback on that. I think it's certainly useful information. It's really, both as a school committee member and as a parent, it's great to see. And I hope some people are tuned in and listening to it, and I hope others will have access to it in whatever format you find best.
Thank you.
Any other questions from committee members at this time? Okay, seeing none, I will say thank you all for your hard work. The emergent need for a data analyst at the high school level would be greater. An additional data analyst for the district would be just fine. But thank you for all of your hard work on this and for your care and concern on behalf of the students of our district. We really appreciate it and appreciate learning more about this for our roles as well. Okay, moving on, we have the status report on the turf field replacement and the EES playground. So I will turn the time over to Avi for that update. Maybe. Oh, there he is.
Not a lot of new news on the turf field update other than Gail's continuing to go through its process. I think we talked last time about how they're going through the permitting process. They will be presenting to the Conservation Commission in Manchester their design based on the information that we brought to the school committee back in the late summer. And so that hearing will be, I think, on the 25th, which is Tuesday. And on that note, I think it's just one thing that I just want to make sure people are aware of, which I sent out to the subcommittee, I think yesterday, was just that, well, first, so far, I think I've mentioned to the broader group that, you know, initially I mentioned that with the first construction of Brook Street that we thought that there would be a more significant potential timeline with the permitting, just because that Fairfield is closer to the resource area. So far, we've been hearing that it's looking more like a less complex review because we're not building a new field, we're just replacing the surface. So we'll see how the hearing goes. I don't want to prejudge things, but even the types of forms and applications we have to submit are less involved. So that's a good sign. And then there was some question by Conservation Commission to provide additional materials with the package about PFAS or PFAS, which is just a substance that you may remember we talked about previously, that when Gale Associates, the design firm, came to school committee, They answered some questions and we included that in our presentation, which is about chemicals that can be found in the fibers themselves, not in the infill, and some health concerns that have been surfaced by people around the country. And the information that they presented to us, Conservation Commission asked them for their input on that too. We also have heard from some folks in Manchester by the Sea that there's a group that's studying water safety. And the information that was presented to Conservation Commission was very similar, although a lot more detailed, and basically said the same thing, changes in the information, which is basically to say that PFAS is
it just me?
certainly an
No,
important
Avi,
consideration.
you're breaking up.
I'm
It's like you're underwater.
One more connection.
Should we come back to Avi?
Always dial in.
Oh, might be back.
Can you hear me?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, just give me a big wave if it cuts off. Our Wi-Fi tends to have trouble around this time of day, so sorry about that. So the information is consistent with what we've already presented, which is that the studies they reviewed have not shown that there has been higher concentrations in the areas with the turf field than in the natural environment surrounding it, even though people are aware of the fact that PFAS materials can be in some, excuse me, turf fields. Gail also told us, which is part of the presentation, that they will be including a mandated certification from the eventual construction firm and supplier that no PFAS materials will be in the turf that's presented to us. So I think there isn't new news there other than to tell you that this is another group that's asking the same questions. I'm sure you may have heard about this in the media. And I do know that when I understand the town of Manchester is also looking at some of the things they might be considering for Springfield. They have their own engineering firm separate from Gale that's doing its own advising, and what I've seen of their analysis of PFAS risks
Breaking up
has been
again.
very consistent with the data. Okay, are we doing that any better?
Oh,
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Avi, you might try just shutting off your camera. It might help with just the audio.
Okay. Let me know if you can hear me any better.
No, not really.
no.
Okay. I can dial in. Give me a moment, but you can go to someone else if you want. I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, while we wait for Avi to come back then, let's move to our continued conversation, continued business on the fiscal year 24 budget calendar. At the last meeting, we had opened up the thought for contemplation after looking at what the budget calendar already includes and what it doesn't include and what our role is and isn't, to send feedback to Pam in preparation for tonight about if you have anything that you would like to change about that, add to it in specific. So Pam, did you receive any feedback from the committee about this?
I did. Jake sent me something yesterday. I just didn't have time to turn it around and share with everybody. That's on me. I'm sure he could share tonight and we could have a conversation about whether there's action to take or more thought to be had.
Great. Go ahead, Jake. What'd you send?
So I just had a couple questions. I know, last time we talked about this, Pam, you mentioned that we're potentially looking at three different scenarios, and I was just reviewing the kind of working engagement kind of calendar, and really the only thing we have for connection to others outside of ourselves is to the finance committees of the towns, really. And so I was hoping that we could think through a little bit how we engage a broader audience for this, and thinking about that in two ways. One, how can we present like a budget narrative that is not just about the large scale state line items, but how can we present a budget narrative or a program narrative that links to the budget? Whatever, I'm not sure what it is, but some way that relates student and parent and community experience to the budget, so that we encourage more engagement and commentary on whatever we propose for the budget in the future here. And so, to do that, can we think through strategies for engaging, parent-oriented networks, starting with things like PTO and friends groups, school councils, other parent networks in the community. Parents are not the only stakeholder here, however, so are there other ways that we either typically or can engage in this? Keeping in mind, we have a new strategic plan, we have a new, improvement plans, district and school improvement plans as well. So, there's a little bit of the narrative that theoretically is about that as well. So I'm looking to identify whether we can, and if so, how we would approach engaging that broader audience.
Can I ask a clarifying question before we talk about it, Jake?
Please.
So are you, I'm thinking of this in two ways. We have the development process that will bring us to those different scenarios that we'll be engaging in mostly November, December, I'm guessing, and then in January as well. And then once we have a final decision on that, or a direction, I should say, then we've got the answering questions and defending those decisions. So is your question in the development? Are you looking to engage people more in the development or the after effect?
Yes.
Inclusive or, okay. And so do you have any proposals for us to consider?
I don't have specific ones right here because I'm not quite sure where we're going with this. Are we working through together here on what that strategy might look like, or are we asking the question so that we can develop a strategy? I'm not quite sure what this conversation is focused on.
I think the intention originally had been that we would have those ideas and then talk through the different kinds of ideas here so that we could actually be working with like a motion if we're going to actually make a change or add something, a plan or whatnot. But that doesn't mean that we can't talk through some of that here. So,
okay, so I only went to the idea stage, so that's all I thought for you today.
Great. Oh, that's great. And it's an important question, an important thing for us to think about. If any other school committee members have thoughts on it, or Pam, if you want to share any thoughts initially based on this, maybe we could put a timestamp of maybe talk about this till 8:20 or so, and then from there we can take an action plan for how do we want to incorporate this in a more full conversation.
I think Jake and I we're asking the same question and maybe just phrasing it differently, which is, I can tell you how we traditionally approach the budget season. And I can tell you that I don't know what we're asking for just yet. But the question that we were trying to raise with this, by adding a column to the planning calendar, was to say, what does engagement look like, and where do we want it to enter? Some of it's guessing, right? If we think we're really it's going to take all of our energy to get to level services, then I think it's a different conversation than if we think we're looking to create a budget that has investment and reinstatement in it. And I don't know how to advise yet on direction.
So maybe as a starting point, tell me, Jake, as a starting point, do we want to, as a committee, discuss the possibility of coordinating an outreach to the friends of groups and whatnot, just to at least get people aware of the process that we already have in place? Maybe that's a good starting point for awareness. And then potentially, entertain the idea of a virtual parent-friendly town hall, meeting or something like that. I guess I want to make sure that we're doing things that are going to be useful for the process, but also manageable for all of us. Does that make sense?
I appreciate that, and I think that's
Yeah.
a great starting place. You know, I'm just imagining how the time frame on this, and you all have been through
Right.
this, and I haven't. So, but you know, obviously, if we are going to ask for, and this is a theoretical if, but if we, you know, if we were standing up in town meetings and saying, you know, hey, we're looking for a correction of some sort, then what are the things that we have done to engender support at that point?
Mhm.
Same thing when it comes to um, if you know we're just looking at level services and that's where our energy is. You know, in what ways have we engaged and solicited that input to get to that point that we know that we have that support for a level services ask? And same thing with a cut scenario, right? To what extent do we know and have input on what potential impacts that may entail if we have to go down that road? So I don't want to, I am leery about waiting until December or January to start those conversations. So, you know, to the extent that we can start with something like your suggestion, Teresa, that'd be great. And, you know, plan out what those might look like going forward.
And so committee, just so you know, we're having an informal discussion right now. We're actively doing that. So if you would like to make a comment, please do, because that's what this agenda item is. And I do think it's really important to point out too, you know, this is something that in the past, our public budget hearings have primarily served town boards, right? But they are public budget hearings, and boy, I would love to have people who, you know, who wanted to come and ask their questions, not only of, you know, Pam and Avi and our school committee in that format, but also in a way that those town boards that are in attendance for that are hearing those questions as well. So maybe we might want to focus a little bit of effort on making sure that different groups of community stakeholders understand what those those budget hearings are as well. Because they do not have to just be for the town finance committee. Oh, Annie likes this suggestion. She's using the applause icon. Did anyone else from school committee have a thought on this?
I was just thinking about some of the communications that are already going out from, I only have kids at Essex Elementary, but I assume that they're going out from other schools, and making sure that these meetings are on their radar. You know, I know that now that we're getting a weekly newsletter from the principal, which I love and is filled with so much awesome information, it's really easy to add to that. Oh, by the way, there's a school committee meeting coming up. This is what's on the agenda, and this is how you can participate in it. And then maybe the friends of the PTO groups could also be involved with some education around, all right, well, this meeting's coming up and these are the issues that will be discussed there. This is your opportunity to have input on the following issues.
That's a great idea. And we definitely have school administrators who are engaged and willing to do that kind of work. I would guess that would come by Pam's direction by virtue of hearing our requests here. Any other thoughts before I share kind of an action item maybe to move forward? Go ahead, Pam.
As we're thinking about this, can we try to work on, for me right now, it feels very broad. So some of my hesitation isn't on the engagement, it's what are we asking people to engage on? What are we asking them to provide input on? So how do we narrow the scope so it's useful and purposeful for them? Because I think when we did this back in 16, we had a lot of inputs onto what it should be and then a lot of disappointment on what it couldn't be. So how do we frame it in a way that it feels like a good use of time for everyone and that we're actually getting usable information and people feel like they're contributing in a way in which they're heard and not just in a way in which we're soliciting inputs that aren't necessarily usable for the scenario that we're in. So just how do we put some
what if we
break to it? And that we're probably not there yet, but I think that's what I struggle with when we have this conversation. So the active engagement, absolutely. What are we asking them to engage about, I think becomes an important area we need to narrow down and be specific with people.
So what if we started with looking at this the way we've sort of categorized, like there's the development process, but then there's answering and defending once decisions are made. And we as a school committee are the elected officials charged with making the actual hard decisions, right? So what if in that first section of things, because Jake, I hear your point about making sure that there's access to the information, to understanding that this is going on and to having input here. But what if we look at this in the development process as an awareness, maybe not campaign, but as an awareness focus, that we want people to make sure that they're able to access this stuff in real time, not hear about it after the fact. So if our focus from now through that point could be making sure that, these different groups, like Jake said, friends ofs and school councils know what's coming, that they understand the budget calendar so that they know what opportunities are coming. And then once we get to a point of decision, then we have a place to actually solicit some feedback about priorities and things. Jake, this is kind of your baby, so I'm interested in your feedback on that, and then we'll take Anna.
I love the conversation. I appreciate that we're having this conversation, so I'm going to let others speak here.
Sure. Anna and then Kate.
So are we talking about development process, meaning that before the December 6th budget presentation, or meaning that sometime in November? Or are we talking about between December 6th and February of
I think it might be 7th. Yeah. So when I'm saying this, just to clarify, because I was the one who said it, when I'm saying the development process, I'm thinking about the awareness that we're going to have our first report out from Pam and Avi on November 1st. Then we're going to have another one on November 15th. Then we're going to have an all boards meeting that week after Thanksgiving. That also will be a public meeting for people. So making sure that there's an awareness of that, so that if people wish to pay attention and engage, they have the opportunity to be paying attention in those moments, and they know about it in advance. At school committee, we hear a lot about, well, I didn't even know this was happening until a decision was made. So pushing for an awareness so that then when we get to that mid-December budget hearing, for instance, people can come prepared to ask.
So
what
thank you for clarifying that. So I think there are two separate issues. One is the awareness. One is once they are aware, what do they want to participate in?
Right.
So I think awareness totally, if whatever they can be more aware, they should. But before we even get to the involvement of the community, I actually think we need to have like Pam is saying, that we need to have our ducks in a row, exactly what we want them to be involved in. So for example, we probably want to have budget kind of a half-baked, the preliminary budget half-baked, and then let community understand that exactly what is optional in a way that people cannot actually comment on. List them out, and what is the potential cost? List them out, and then also not only the optional, as I put it in the air quote, but also what are some of the things that's happening this year that people have been concerning about. What's happening to those? And I'm bringing this up. This is not what I'm concerned about. Is for example, we cut foreign language. Yeah.
Right.
So what's happening to that?
Right,
So
what's the
I think we
status?
need to kind of have a stages and very logically lay it all out, and then that way we don't have people throwing questions and opinions at us. We actually need to be very structured.
So this might help. So when we bring the budget on 12/6, it's going to be, we will start with developing a level services budget and plugging in all of the numbers to roll forward. And then we'll see what that does, right, to those percentage targets. And I don't think I'm going out on a limb to say we're going to be over budget just to roll forward. When we present the 12/6 budget in the tentative, we also include the things we would be asking for typically. So what the staffing requests are. Jake, this is where any of the program investments are that are needed that we haven't included yet in the budget, because at level services, we're already going to be over our benchmark. And that's where we might be able to start having a conversation about, well, is there room to start to include some of these? Is there realistically room to start including some of these things? And to what extent do we want to reach above level services and present above, and that's going to be your first big question as a committee. I'll make a recommendation, but you're going to have to figure out how, if level services is X, how far do you want to go above X to build in new investments or reinstatements, i.e. Elementary foreign language return, into the budget ask that we present to the committee, to the other committees. And then what are we willing to defend? That might be a good juncture to start posing questions to the community. Just off the top of my head.
That's great. And I think we're all, I think, Anna, your point is exactly what Jake's been asking for. He's trying to, I feel like he's been asking and saying, when are we going to lay out this structured detailed plan? And it's coming in bits and pieces and fits and starts, I think. But
and I don't want people to feel like we do include kind of we include our needs in the level services. We also typically outline our wants and try to carry the wants that are either realized through efficiencies or reorganizations and highlight those in the next year, or show an ongoing annual, these were our wants, these are sound investments, these were things we haven't been able to do. The state of the budget in the past few years, and I think the overall state of what we were managing, that really got pushed off very quickly. Like, we didn't spend any time on investigating that because just making the numbers work in the COVID crisis was enough for everybody to bite off and process. So I think if you ever went back and looked at some of the older annual budget, tentative budget presentations, there's a pretty good year-to-year accounting of what we've wanted to invest in and what we could and couldn't because of resources. So we do spend time on that when it's allowed for.
Kate, you've been so patient.
Oh, I'll just echo what Anna said. Anna basically, I think, made all of the points. I feel like there's a disconnect sometimes between what people want educationally and what they bring to our meetings, because they view us as the educational experts and providers, whether we are or not. But when it comes down to it, we cannot provide the services that we want to unless they're funded. And so I think that people need a very realistic vision of where we are and what a level services budget looks like, what it does not look like. Before, I think they need that vision before the meeting in December when Pam presents those options, because I think that people need to come to that meeting with constructive input. I don't think that you can come up with constructive input until you have that understanding. So I view our challenge as bridging sort of that educational vision that I think a lot of our stakeholders come in with the budgetary limitations and the budgetary constraints.
So as we're talking, I'm almost envisioning like a little flow chart that has the level services in a box in the middle and then arrows going in both directions, because our decision points may bring us away from level services or moving. I don't know if my hands are going in the right direction for everybody who's watching on screen. We're either going backwards and we're retreating from level services because the numbers are driving that, or we're finding opportunities or finding support to move forward in growing or reinstating some of our program. I think what I'm also envisioning is I have another line coming off of here, which is I am super conscious of, and this may just be my problem, a lot of the vision does not require a specific price tag. A lot of the vision is around reculturing and expanding our understanding of students and changing some of our practice to prepare for future needs. There's a minimal investment in that, but if we had a true level services budget, that's accounted for annually, and that's managed on a year-to-year basis. So what we've always tried to do is keep away and plan in a way that is cyclical and project it out. So we don't need to come forward with any one budget and saying we need $250,000 additional this year to make this thing happen. So we'll try to explain that a little better, that a function of our budget has capital investments for curriculum and instructional technology that should be at $100,000 annually, which should be, if we are thoughtful and planning appropriately, enough money to cover most investments in professional development and program refreshment.
So what if we blew right past my 8:20 timestamp, but I think it's valuable conversation that needed to happen. So what if we, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a motion. Okay. Recognizing the conversation we've had, that we still have kind of two boxes here, and one we're not quite ready to spell out quite so clearly yet, but one we maybe are, the awareness aspect of this, that we want people who wish to engage in future to be aware now. So I would like to make a motion that we create a small, maybe 2-person working group to put together a small plan of action for awareness purposes for the community. I'm sure we have community members that would be willing to engage with that as well. So my motion is that we create a 2-member, is that a thing we can do, Pam? Is that a motion I can make?
Yeah, just from past experience, we probably want to be really clear on the mission and charge of that group, because otherwise it goes awry. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out who and what. And
okay, I can clarify my motion on that. To clarify, my motion is to create a 2-person working group to create a plan to increase awareness within the community for the upcoming meetings that are already scheduled as part of our process for budget development, in preparation for community members to engage at the December public budget hearing. That's my motion. Is there a second? I can't tell if you're raising your hand for a question.
Second. Yes, that was a second. I just couldn't find the unmute button.
Okay, any discussion about that motion with that specific charge? Yes, Anna.
So 2 people, we need, are you talking about 2, 1 from each town or 2 from each town?
No, 2 people total is what I'm saying, because 2 from each town would be a quorum. So I'm saying 2 people who are most interested in this sort of thing, and we can decide after we decide to do it, we can decide who will do it. So what if a vote passes for this, then we can decide who handles this. Yes, Jake.
Can I just clarify why this would not be the budget subcommittee? Just, and I don't know what your kind of agenda looks like going forward, but it seems like the budget process is part of that. And just to avoid stepping on toes, if it's not the 2 of you, how do we coordinate that?
So my motion specifically for a separate working group is recognizing that I, as part of our finance subcommittee, have considerable amount on my plate. And I think that there are other people at the table who are certainly capable of taking this on if they wish to.
I would just caution that we don't send off another group independent of everybody until we have some clarity on what we want to communicate.
I'm literally just trying to get so that after we leave here, 2 people can talk and say, okay, who are the people in each town who we can lean on to help us promote things by social media? Which groups do we want to make sure announces this? Who's going to get in touch with principals to let them know? Like that kind of very simple awareness campaign. Again,
I have a blueprint I'd be happy to share from previous get out the vote of how this was attacked in the past. We may not be recreating the wheel.
Great. Yes, Jake.
So
I very much appreciate what you're trying to do, Teresa, and I believe I support it. I'm just not sure that I understand quite what it is and what you're asking for in the spur of the moment here. Would it be possible that we table this for next one so we have a chance to think it through? We have the draft of your motion and just a little time to process it. Would that be reasonable?
We absolutely. My main concern with putting a motion out right now was the concern about time frame. Our next meeting is November 1st, which is our first budget presentation. So I'm fine if we do this informally also. If we take a vote and we don't wish to say 2 people are going to be assigned to do this thing. really. It's just that I don't want us to leave this meeting and then have us show up in 2 weeks at November 1st and have us not done anything and then have people feel frustrated that we didn't do a thing. So that's my primary concern right now.
What I have on my active to-do list is to get out a beginning of November, budget season is upon us. Communication that outlines all of the key dates and activities coming up for the next few months.
Mhm.
So we'll have that go out in November. And I'm hearing you want us to activate more postings around the school committee meetings to preview the agenda for people. We can get that going. Other than that, until November, I don't know that we have a message to message. And if we start to like reach out to the groups, I'm really wanted to think through what we're communicating to the groups as we start to make contact.
Mhm.
So once we have the list, I think we just need to be very thoughtful. And I'm kind of leaning into Jake's. Let's pace ourselves on this,
Yeah,
because
that's fine.
if we get too excited and start outreaching without something concrete for them, I think we're going to make a lot of work for ourselves in trying to explain what we're trying to do.
Okay. Kate, were you saying? No, that wasn't Kate. Okay. Yes, Anna.
In a way, I kind of agree with Jake and Pam that Pam, if you already have a blueprint what we did last year, that would be great. To Jake's point, that this is part of the budget process. If we want to refine it to incorporate, X, Y, and Z, blah blah blah, I think it could be a good conversation for us to discuss it preliminary in the finance subcommittee. That being said, I know that we talk about the next meeting is whatever, if we might not have enough time. I think that the subcommittee doesn't have, we can move things around at different time to make sure that it gives us enough time to think about it, brainstorm, whatever it is. So we are not too rigid to the schedule.
Right. My point with this is that to put anything else on the finance subcommittee literally involves me, and I am not available to take on any more things right now. So if someone would like to stand in for me and talk about these things, that would be just fine, but I cannot take on another thing right now. So I'm just trying to be very realistic.
And I do think we have more time than we realize, because right now, from now through January 1, we're building a budget. We're just getting our hands around it. We have no real concrete numbers, so a lot of it's estimated, a lot of it's projected. We got to pace ourselves, because our whole budget process is going to go from January through May, right? And a lot of the communication efforts are going to be March and April. And a lot of the sales of the budget will be in March and April. So we need initial inputs and engagement, and we want to pull people all the way through. But I think if we come out, I think I would caution coming out too hot and too fast, because I don't know if we can sustain engagement for the entirety of the process, especially through some of the technical beginning parts.
Yep. And
that's just a perspective.
And I am perfectly willing to, even based on, the conversation, rescind my motion if that's what we feel we need to do. Again, my main concern is that what I've been hearing, particularly from new members for the past 4 or 5 months, is we want to make sure that everybody knows about things before they know about things. And with all due respect, I love all the additional postings and things, but I think what I've been hearing, not just from our committee, is that just the communications that come from the district aren't necessarily enough. That's not meeting all of that need. If we as a committee are comfortable moving forward with the blueprint that we already have, then that's a totally different thing. That just wasn't what I was hearing, and I'm fully in support of moving forward with the budget process as outlined, because I'm quite comfortable with that. Jake, did you have a thought?
What are you?
Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just gonna say, what are you hearing about?
For the past 2 years, parents and also community members who don't necessarily receive all of the communications from the school district. If you're not following MERS on Instagram, you're not seeing a post from MERS, that sort of thing. Again, this isn't my personal concern. This is me trying to serve the voice of the committee, as far as I've heard.
Good to know.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, now that I've had a few minutes to think about it as we chatted here, what I'm a little worried about here is that this is becoming a conversation about communication, right? Sending a message out. And I think my original proposal is more than that. I think that's an important part. but it also has to do, to Kate's point and Anna's point about how do we help people prepare to provide constructive input, which is more than just trying to send a message out. So I think that, if we can think a little bit more about, to our earlier conversations about the process and our strategy, I think that'll be helpful then to identify the actions that you're proposing here.
So I guess so maybe Matt or Chris or Erica, do you have any thoughts on this? Because if we don't need 2 people to make a plan, then we don't need 2 people to make a plan. I don't want us to come back November 1st and say there was no plan. Any other thoughts? Go ahead.
I think it's a good idea to be mobilized. I think it's a good idea to be over prepared. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so how about this? How about we take the vote, because there was a motion on the table, recognizing that a vote against doesn't mean that we don't want to understand things. It may mean that we wish to think about it further and discuss it at our next meeting, recognizing the time constraints anyway, that's okay. And that we just want to think about it further before assigning anybody to work on this. That would be what a vote against could potentially be. So any other commentary?
Are we voting on creating a separate little group with 2 people in it?
We're voting to assign 2 people to move forward, as stated earlier. I can't rename all the words with the exact charge, but it's in the notes. But yes, so it's the original motion is on the table. Yes. So if you wish to have 2 people set aside to create a plan for helping the community be aware of the things that we have available for the budget development process, we're not necessarily soliciting input. We are making people aware of the November 1, November 15th, all boards, and the December budget hearing, the public budget hearing. If we don't think we need that, then vote no. If you do think we need that, then vote yes. That's really all we're looking at. If we don't need that, then that's fine. Yes, Erica. You're on mute. You're on mute, Erica.
You're still on mute.
It's not your voice, it's mute.
I got it. It's my voice too. I'm sorry. A point of clarification. Teresa, you are purely, I think, talking about messaging, communicating the upcoming meetings, whereas Jake is talking about something different.
Yes.
I appreciate both of those points. I'm just trying to get my very stuffy head around what we're really talking about right now. So the only thing on the table is, do we need 2 people to let the community know what's coming up, because perhaps they're not seeing Instagram or so forth?
Yes, that is, in this particular motion, because I think that anything beyond this needs further consideration.
Agreed.
And saying, do we need people to make sure that word gets out? That's it. That's all I'm working with here. Not a message, not anything beyond that, just awareness. But again, I am not married to this. So if we don't think it's necessary, that's fine too. Okay, any other thoughts before we take a vote on whether this is necessary or not? Okay, by roll call, all in favor? Hold on, where's my list? Kate?
Yes.
Chris?
No.
Jake?
No.
Anna?
No.
Erica?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Who did I miss? That's 5.
Yourself?
No, but that's only 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That's 6, isn't it?
6. Was it 6? So do we have 3 and 3 right now?
Yep.
Of course we do. I'm going to say yes. It does not have to be a lot. We will work it out. Okay, the motion carries barely. 4-3. And we can continue this conversation throughout the process, of course.
Except we need to identify 2 people, don't we?
We do. So who's interested in doing this?
Since I brought it up, I will volunteer, even though
I'm
not
so
sure
glad
for
to
the
hear that,
but I will
Jake.
volunteer.
Well, it seems like you were trying to volunteer me. And
I don't know, Teresa, you already said you wouldn't do it, but you voted yes. So that leaves 3 other people that voted yes.
That is true.
I'll
So
do
we
it
need one.
if we're
Erica
just
says
talking
yes.
about.
I think that's great. And I think that that's a good broad
balance. Yeah.
balance. Great. Jake and Erica are going to look at this. And yeah, actually, I'm going to stop speaking there. Okay. Thank you.
Can I just add a comment? Please
Please.
feel free, Erica and Jake, to reach out to any of us who have children in different schools to get key contacts.
And can I also mention something? I would say, depends on what the communication might look like. Feel free to reach out to the finance subcommittee as well, to Teresa and I, about the messaging or what you're trying to do.
Well, hold on. So nope, I'm gonna be very pushback. There is no messaging. The messaging is these things are coming up. And also, to be clear, we have to be careful as school committee members that we're not the ones. So part of the role here is to engage other people to do that. So that's why I was trying to be very, very clear in my motion for Pam's recommendation. Pam, I see you wanting to say something. Just say.
I'm just trying to figure out, and this is me, I'm having a processing problem.
That's okay.
What exactly is the deliverable?
The deliverable?
I am concerned, you are the spokesperson of the committee. So the formal communications should be coming from the chair. If we're messaging out, what are we messaging? Who are we messaging to? I'm being a concrete learner right now, and we don't have to continue this tonight.
That's okay.
Let me see if I can answer that, since I volunteered here. It's not a message that we're sending out. It is simply trying to identify people who can help us raise awareness of the upcoming public events.
Yes.
Okay.
That is exactly what I wish I had said 5 minutes ago. Thank you for saying that.
And I would add to that, I too have heard Teresa's feedback that she started with, that people in the community often feel like they didn't know what was happening. And this is a, worldwide problem. This is not Manchester, and we're not going to solve it. But the more we can try to encourage engagement, which is really what I see this role as being, encouraging engagement. I think that's a win for everyone. No messaging at all. I think I used the word messaging, and that's not what I meant. I just meant try outreach to make sure there's participation.
Promotion.
That sounds like we're promoting something.
I know. We're promoting an event. We don't have the right word yet.
We can table it.
That's all right.
I think we are promoting something, and that's where we're going to get. We want to be very mindful that in the ask to participate, there's going to have to be a why, and what is the message of why? Why are we upping our outreach? Why are we encouraging people to come? What is it that they're coming to see and do? We are going to have some agreed upon bullet points for the committee so that there is some consistency in how we are trying to solicit engagement and the purpose for soliciting increased engagement. I would recommend.
Okay.
Because otherwise, I think it can get very messy very quickly.
So is that something you want to talk through right now a little bit, or do we want to put that on for the next day? Like for me, I have one single purpose in increasing engagement, and that is, or not even increasing engagement. My goal currently is increasing awareness.
Why don't Erica and I and Pam take that up, or Eric and I with consulting by Pam take that up as a thing to frame for us to consider next time. So we wouldn't necessarily be doing anything out in the public, which we shouldn't be doing anyway, but we'll have a plan for you to share that takes into account Pam's consideration.
Great. That sounds reasonable. Okay, that was tedious. All right. Back to Avi.
I see a hand up.
Well, Is it regarding the last thing?
Sorry.
Oh, it's gone. Anna, is
Can
it
you-
regarding the last thing? 'Cause we're
Sorry,
going
I
back-
clicked on the
oh,
wrong thing.
Gotcha.
I can wait. Sorry,
No,
I
you're
never
ready,
spoke up.
Abby. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm sorry about the audio problems, and I can call in the future to avoid that. So I'll keep it quick, because I know the meeting is getting late. So I was trying to explain that Concom's getting the same type of information we got already. I just wanted you to know it was in circulation, as well as the fact that from what we've heard, Manchester by the Sea is going through its own review and I guess investigation into what it might do in Sweeney, and had its own separate consultant reach some of the same consultant, evaluate the data the same type of way with same conclusions from what I've seen. And they happen to have, that's Weston and Sampson, and they also have experience in water treatment. So unlike Gale, which is just, works on turf field. So I thought that was good to see. I just wanted you all to be aware of that. We'll see how hopefully the Conservation Commission hearing will go off smoothly. And the other item that we started to look at was preliminarily using our district staff, which is really Jason and Cami in athletics, have started to help me to pull together data around field usage from what we know. And because we know that this is going to be an important issue about any potential split of costs for the Brook Street field, which is a joint use facility per the regional agreement. We've just started looking at that. So far, preliminary numbers that we're seeing do seem to suggest that a 50-50 split is roughly on target. We've been looking at those numbers both from who has quote unquote control of the field. Like, for example, during the day, even if it's not being used, the town will generally say, hey, it's yours to use. So that's time that we can calculate and count for. And certainly over the summer, the town might not be scheduling it, but it's the town's asset in that time. So under the kind of control approach, we would divide it that way, versus a different approach is to just look at, who's on it, what times, doing what things. So we're trying to look at it both ways. We're really just trying to get the best information we have. So we have something that is more easy for people to look at quantitatively and hopefully agree upon. So I sent that preliminary information to the subcommittee. We'll see if they have any questions. I just sent it around. As I said, it's about 50-50 either way you look. Obviously, we'll need to work collaboratively with the town of Manchester by the Sea, get their input. We have gotten some of the information directly from them on how they've booked the field, but we still have work to do to share the numbers with them and get their input, and we'll bring that back. So just wanted to let you know about that. And then the only other update is about the playground at Essex, unless there's any questions first about the turf field. Great. You can hear me okay? Just no
We
questions.
can hear
right?
you. I don't see anyone
Great.
with questions.
Awesome. Great. And then things are progressing. I got an update from Jason Waldron, who can't be with us tonight, but some of the things you may remember, we had mentioned that we were going to delay the seeding, the hydro seeding of the playground area, which has now been done, which is great. We've had some rains. That's great too. So that work has been done, has been the finishing of the topsoil. So that's great. And on the plantings, they did install a maple tree. The rest of the shrubs and planting are not available in stock, so they're going to have to wait for the spring. Those are items that are being funded by the community funds and PTO. And I think the plan is still that they would be installed by volunteers. And my understanding is that benches and tables, which will also be funded through those community funds, have been ordered and actually paid for and should be installed sometime in the spring. Jake is here, and Jake is often very much aware of what's going on. So Jake, if I've misstated anything or if there's anything you think I missed, please jump in.
No, that's my understanding too. Thank you for that.
Great. So that's my update. Any questions?
I have none. I got a really nice detailed email yesterday in my office. Any questions, committee members? No? All right. Do you need anything from us at this time, Avi? Just understanding and okay. Great. Thank you very much.
I know everyone's excited for budget season, so I'm looking forward to it too.
I'm sure. Okay, that closes our continued business. School committee comment? I literally have nothing. It's probably the first time in 2.5 years. Okay, I will move to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor by roll call? Jake,
Yes.
Anna,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Who am I missing? Erica.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. We are adjourned at 8:54 p.m.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Maria,
everyone.
for
Everyone.
staying late.